Welcome back. It's time for another edition of Silver and Black today. Scott Branson, Mo Moten with you. We are an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe wherever you get your audio. We would certainly appreciate that. Also, our video brought to you by our good friends over at BetUS, where, as always, this offer, you cannot escape it. It's amazing. 150% sign-up bonus. Just go to BetUS, open your account, use the promo code YouTube150. That's YouTube150. And guess what? 150% sign-up bonus. And not only that, extra 125% bonuses on deposits 2 and 3. All deposits up to $2,000 that code applies for. Again, it's YouTube150 from our good friends at BetUS, where the game began. All right. We are back. We are talking Raiders football, but not much going on. Just some firing. We have reached firing season in the NFL, of course. Early on Monday, Dennis Allen, the Saints coach, former Raiders coach, was also fired. He was fired. Their team, guess what? Same record as the Raiders, 2-7. The Raiders make changes on offense. Gone is Luke Getsy, Rich Scangarello. And so you start to see the effect of a season that has completely gone off a cliff, Mo. Surprising, not surprising. You, 3 weeks ago, I went back and I watched. You said, hey, I don't expect anything to happen, but at the bye week, watch for it, because if things are not going well, if there's a natural time to do it, to make a change with Luke Getsy on offense, it's going to be at the bye week. And guess what? They barely got off the plane after the loss the other day. And guess what? Luke Getsy, probably when he got to the bottom of the stairs, said, hey, we're on the tarmac. You don't need to come in the office tomorrow. So it's all happened. Mo, I want to get your comments on this. First of all, doesn't do a lot for the rest of the season, but certainly something had to give.
So number one, this is not a surprise. I think I've been calling for Luke Getsy to either be fired, or I said he wasn't going to make it into 2025 based on the way things were going. And I've also said that if I were Raiders brass, I would pull Antonio Pierce into my office and say, either you have to let Luke Getsy go, or I have to let both of you go. And this is how it goes in the NFL. Whatever side of the ball is not performing well before a bye for a 2-7 team, the coach of that side of the ball is going to get fired, right? So Dennis Allen's Saints defense used to be the strength of that football team. It has regressed significantly. So Dennis Allen, who is a defensive-minded head coach, is going to be relieved of his duties. Antonio Pierce is a defensive-minded head coach. But we all know that even though the defense didn't play well against the Bengals, we know that the defense is the stronger side of the ball for the Raiders. So, of course, he is going to, and I use the word sacrifice because I think this puts Antonio Pierce on the clock, that if things didn't change, he was going to lose his job. So he had to offer up, quote unquote, a sacrifice to salvage himself. People are going to look at this and say, well, the offense wasn't playing well, so Luke Getsy was fired. And that's the easy way to look at it. But if we're spinning this forward, Scott, I look at it as Antonio Pierce is also feeling the pressure to at least make this team look competitive past the first 5 minutes of games, because he knows if that doesn't happen, he's going to lose his job too.
Yeah, and that's where, it gets interesting. By the way, Craig, the offensive line coach, was also let go. I forgot to mention him when we were talking about it at the top of the show. But clearly the offense was beyond bad, and the defense, like you said, it's the better of the two units, but it is struggling too. So this whole idea that the Raiders are fine on one side of the ball is not true. The entire Raider team is facing challenges that it must come up with. And to your point, self-preservation is an amazing thing. Antonio Pierce, and I'm sure exactly happened how you laid it out, which is, hey, they said, listen, Antonio, you hired these guys. And remember, for those of you who said, well, we're not sure he hired them, Vinny Bonsignore, a good friend at the RJ, wrote that he had full autonomy in hiring this staff. So anybody that you saw on that staff was picked for and hired by Antonio Pierce. Folks, he owns it. He owns it. He owns it. No excuses, injuries, BS. Everybody's got injuries. Everything happens. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But when you're the CEO type coach, and Ted Nguyen, our friend from The Athletic, too, mentioned this. He said, hey, if you're looking at Antonio Pierce, since he's a defensive coach, he doesn't do any play calling, he's a CEO type head coach. How many times have we used that term on this show, Mo? Like every week, right?
A ton.
A ton. And when you look at that, He gets Antonio Pierce gets a failing grade on all of it because he can't manage the games well, and he didn't hire a good staff, at least offensively. Defense, maybe we could argue back and forth about that. But here's the thing, Mo. You look at where this team is at, and I said this to you before we went on the air. If I don't see Mark Davis, firing Antonio Pierce in the middle of his first season, okay? Unless if they come back from the bye and they lose 2 or 3 games in a row, could happen. I mean, maybe it doesn't because, listen, the Raiders need to get a quarterback next year. So, yes, they got to go out and fight. And I see fight in this team. I want to say that, too, because I don't want to defame the players because I do see most of the Raiders out there, and they are fighting. They're fighting hard. They're playing hard. So you can't take that away from them. But I do think, though, that if things continue to go south, you mentioned it, right, Mo? Owners don't like to be embarrassed.
Owners would like to be embarrassed, but fortunately for Antonio Pierce, the Raiders don't have a nationally televised game until the end of November. So I think that Chiefs game, if it's a bloodbath, and then they got a Monday Night Football game against the Falcons, 15s late in the season, December. If those 2 games are a bloodbath, it's not going to look good at Antonio Pierce. I'm not saying he gets fired after those 2 games if it is a blowout, but that
Right.
goes on that's going to go on his resume as, look, we were on national TV and your team wasn't prepared, especially if the Raiders don't look prepared. It's one thing to not be prepared in a 1:00 game on East Coast time zone and only local, audience sees it. It's another thing to not be prepared for a nationally televised game where you are the only game on TV and everyone is watching. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, look out for that. But looking ahead now, Scott Turner's name has been brought up as the replacement play caller. It's not. I don't think it's official yet, but his name has been tossed around. Rich Scangarello, who I've talked about endlessly on this show, can't keep a job, and lo and behold, he's fired again. And then you have James Craig, who was the assistant offensive line coach of the 49ers, brings over that zone blocking scheme that didn't fit Zamir White well. And what has Antonio Pierce talked about since week 1 of the season? He wants to get Zamir White going. So I think when we listen, Scott, you and I, before we got on this show, we started recording, we listened to Antonio Pierce talk. And one thing that I picked up, he said, the philosophy has to mesh.
Yes.
So in my opinion, what he took over last year when he had Zamir White going, well, initially it was Josh Jacobs, then Zamir White, it didn't match what was going on this year with the zone blocking system. And I think that's where the rub was between he and James Craig.
Yeah. And listen, that's the thing too. And I'm sorry. I know some people up there upset, although I think that most of the people who are really big fans of Antonio Pierce as coach, who would go back and forth with me on excuses on why he's struggling, I haven't heard a lot from them. And I just frankly don't think he's up to the job at this point. I prove me wrong. He says resume on the grass, 2-7. Somebody responded, well, but if you include last year, he's 5-11 or 7-11. I'm like, no. Let's not do that. You picked your staff. To your point about why isn't it meshed? The head coach's job. You hire an OC. You would think that going into the season, and he said this when we were watching the press conference too, Mo. He said, Antonio Pierce said, when we went into the season, we felt really good about what we had, about the plan. Okay. Well, then, but you said it didn't mesh. Why didn't it mesh? If you had a plan, maybe it was the wrong plan. So now they have to readjust. And to your point, moving forward, if it's Scott Turner, which we all think it will be, like you said, they haven't announced it officially as we're talking right now, but you're going to have to see improvement. And I've said this about Antonio Pierce the whole season, which is like, hey, I don't believe that he's going to succeed at this point. But if he shows improvement and the team progresses, then he could save his role and come back for a year 2. And if he gets the right offensive coordinator and coaching staff, then maybe that. But he hired a coaching staff, and it's not been a good thing. So do you trust him to do that? Do you trust the coach? You did a great column on SportsNot, which I think you reposted after the firings, saying, would you trust this staff, even with the offensive coordinators and guys gone now like Scangarelli? Would you trust Antonio Pierce with that? At this point, how could you?
You can't. And then that was the premise of my piece, is that you can like Antonio Pierce and want him to succeed. I mean,
Sure.
we all do for the purposes of the show. But if you're the Raiders and you're looking ahead to 2025 and you're assuming the Raiders are going to draft a young quarterback, do you trust this staff to develop the offensive side of the staff to trust that quarterback with Antonio Pierce picking the offensive coordinator? Because I assumed that Luke Getsy was going to be there in 2025 and he's not. Right. And right now, as of today, as of Monday, November 4th, the Raiders coaching staff has not earned that trust yet. And if they haven't earned that trust and that's valid, then you're going to get a young quarterback who is going to go through a tumultuous situation. If Antonio Pierce hangs on, but then he gets fired after year one, now your young quarterback's going to have to learn a new offense in his second year. So he's going to have two offensive coordinators or play callers within 2 years, maybe a new coaching staff, and all sorts of changes around him. And my point is, people scream about the Raiders need stability, stability, stability. If you don't fully trust Antonio Pierce's coaching staff, you might as well move on from it so that you don't have to make these changes early into that rookie quarterback's career.
And I know this will sound crazy to Raider Nation for all they've been through over the last 25 years, because I'm sure guys behind microphones, women behind microphones have said this for the last 20 years too. But my belief is if they don't make the right choice right now, Mo, it's big trouble, because you're at the point now where you have to get that young developmental quarterback, the quarterback you're going to develop, I should say, into your franchise quarterback, since it appears the Raiders will be in position to get a top quarterback in the draft this year. I don't see how you can stick with Antonio Pierce, because there's so many question marks in the performance. It's not like he struggled a little bit and then righted the ship a little bit. And don't use the Dan Campbell examples. Go look at Dan Campbell's 3-13 season. Understand it, study it, and you'll see the differences. But to me, I don't see how you can. I mean, I think you have to go. If I'm Mark Davis now, I know people are mad at Mark Davis now because he's the ultimate decision maker, right? He's responsible. He's the guy who pays the bills. But to me, you're going to have Tom Brady there, depending on what Tom Brady does with his broadcast career. If he can be more involved with the Raiders, if that all works out based on the rules they set up for him, then if I'm Mark Davis, I'm definitely getting him in on the quarterback, and I'm going to leverage his relationships, because if people know Tom Brady's involved in the running of the franchise, then people will want to come, okay? Right now, you've got to do this, and I just don't believe, and anybody can argue with me all you want, I don't believe Antonio Pierce can do this job. I just don't. I'm going on the resume on the grass. I'm going on what I've seen during the games. They fire these offensive coaches. They don't fire the game management coach, probably because it's not his fault. You have Marvin Lewis there. We've gone through all this crap, so I'm not going to go over it again. But any way you look at this, Mo, nothing has gone well.
So last week I brought up this point that a lot of people are not talking about. The job of a head coach is to build a quality staff. And you mentioned it. A lot of people want to compare Antonio Pierce to Dan Campbell. And who did Dan Campbell have on his coaching staff after the Lions let go of their offensive coordinator, Anthony Lynn? They promoted Ben Johnson, the same coordinator that most teams are going to want to be their head coach in the offseason. Who is the young, and I'm asking this question again because I asked it last week and I didn't get a good answer yet. Who is the young coach that Antonio Pierce has on that staff that he can bring up or develop as, I don't want to say as the next Ben Johnson, but just as the next brilliant mind on the offensive side of the ball? It seems that Antonio Pierce, being the experienced head coach he is, brought in a bunch of older assistants. But where are the young talented minds on that staff? Because again, that's what Dan Campbell did. He brought some young brilliant minds along with him that he identified, and Ben Johnson being one of them, and promoted him to an offensive coordinator. Where is the young brilliant mind on the Raiders head coach, on the Raiders coaching staff that Pierce hired as he assembled his coaching council?
And we're not just here to say we told you so, because that's not what it's about. Because again, and I want people to understand this, even though Mo and I cover the Raiders objectively, not as fans, when the Raiders do well, it's better for you as a fan because you're happy, right? It's better for us. We do content around the Raiders. It's not great when you're 2-7. Okay, we want the Raiders to do really well. If the Raiders go to a Super Bowl, that's the biggest dream we have, because it's great for us. You guys are excited. You want to talk about the Raiders. You want to think about the Raiders all the time. Right now, you're like, oh, you're frustrated. Okay, so just get that out of the way. But I look at this, to your point, It's about development. We go back to when they hired Antonio Pierce, and we were talking about, why didn't you interview Jim Harbaugh? Why didn't you interview this guy, that guy? Some real candidates. And we tried to explain to people, okay, a lot to like about Antonio Pierce, his attitude, all that swagger, all that stuff was really cool. And it still is. But coaches, to your point, hire staffs. What kind of line? He was a linebacker coach. He was not a coordinator. He didn't have a long career in the NFL. He didn't have the network. Well, he taps into Marvin Lewis. Okay. And what does Marvin Lewis bring with him? A bunch of other guys in their 50s and 60s who are washed out of other teams. That's where the Raiders are at. I'm sorry. That's where it is. Okay. I'm 50 years old. I'm not capping on them because they're older. I'm capping on them because they're not the future of the league. They're not these young coaching staffs, like you said, Ben Johnson. So that's where we're at. And so that's how it's going to go. And we'll talk more about this when we come back from the break. We're going to bring you a word from our buddies over at BetUS now. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion about this and where it leaves. What does it look like for Antonio Pierce down the line? And what does it look like for this team? Are they going to go with Desmond Ridder the rest of the way? Because Gardner Minshew has been an ultimate disaster this year. How much of that is on him? How much of that is on the offense and the entire situation with the Raiders? We don't know, but we'll talk about that when we come back. It's Mo, it's Scott. This is Silver and Black Today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Segment number 2, Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review as well wherever you get your audio. We would appreciate that very much. Mo Moton, he's a senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report, also Raiders columnist at sportsnaut.com. You can follow him on x.com. Just be gentle. At Mo Moton, Moemoton. I'm kidding, actually. Mo can always handle himself in a knife fight, so that's good. And I am at LV Gully, and the show is SNB Today. We appreciate you being with us. Video, as always, brought to you by the great folks at BetUS. If you're not with BetUS, you're crazy. Get 150% sign-up bonus. Use the promo code YouTube150. That's YouTube150, and enjoy a nice bonus from the folks at BetUS, where the game begins. All right, Mo, continue on with this conversation of where the Raiders are at. We go into this bye week. They come back against Miami. They have a tough schedule. I had a couple Raider fans say, well, I have 2 more wins for us, they said. They said Denver, and I'm like, whoa. Denver, who has a top 5 defense, who's 5-4, by the way. They have 5 wins, okay? It's interesting to me. It goes back to what you and I always talk about. A lot of folks, and God bless you all out there. I'm not saying you should, but a lot of fans of certain teams, I don't care what team you're a fan of, Packers, Raiders, whoever, they don't watch other teams, right? So you hate the Broncos, and I get that, and I love the rivalry stuff. But the Broncos are no pushover. The Broncos are a better team than the Raiders right now. I don't care what you say. And they get better quarterback play even with the mistakes Bo Nix makes. So you look at that, Miami, you look at Denver, you look at Tampa Bay, you look at Atlanta. Boy, if Antonio Pierce is going to climb up that hill, Mr. Moton, it's going to be remarkable. He'll have to do a job like he did at the end of last season and somehow turn this team around, turn the mood around, and get some wins, which I know fans don't want now because they want a quarterback, but it's a dicey situation for him because they need that draft pick, but also the guy wants to keep his job.
The 2 wins that I see on the schedule are late in the season. Jaguars in week 16 at home, Saints in week 17.
Saints for
those
sure.
Are those are the only 2 games I can see the Raiders possibly winning. And it's because both teams on the field are probably going to be awful at the time those games are played. The Jaguars are 2-7. They have some talent on that team. But they cannot close 1-score games. They fell behind on Sunday 22-0 to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now the Philadelphia Eagles are a good team, but the Jaguars they've been leaking oil for quite some time, and I think Doug Peterson's in trouble. Now, as you mentioned early in segment 1, the Saints fired their head coach, so they're already in disarray. Those are the 2 games that I feel like the Raiders, could notch a 4-13 record, but you mentioned the Denver Broncos. I know they got the doors blown off by the Ravens, but the Raiders beat the Ravens with Devontae Adams, by the way. But when you look at when you look at the Raiders in Denver, how they match up, Denver, Bo Nix can still make some plays, and the Raiders are probably going to go through a quarterback change, and I expect Desmond Ridder to be the starter, be named the starter sooner than later, and you're going to have Desmond Ridder who turns the ball over a ton. And just look at the play caller difference here. You're going to have maybe Scott Turner calling plays for the Raiders, and you got Sean Payton on the other side.
Yeah. By the way, Scott Turner, because I had a bunch of folks message me. Scott Turner is Norv Turner's son, former coach of the Raiders, by the way, just so you know that they are related. And he's also a former UNLV quarterback, I must remind people.
Of course.
And the other night, on Sunday Night Football, you had a San Diego State quarterback going against a UNLV quarterback with Minnesota and Indianapolis. Of course, the San Diego State quarterback won. That's the way it goes. But anyway, yeah, Mo, I think you're talking about the quarterback change. But I mean, look at the Raiders, too. And I made this point last night, and people were like, whoa, who cares? Because they were angry. But 3 of the top 5 defenses, according to the Sportsnot NFL defensive power rankings and a bunch of other publications the same, 3 of the AFC West defenses are in the top 5 in the league. And that's obviously not the Raiders, who are near the top 10. They're 12 last time I checked. I didn't check this morning after the weekend's action to see where they're at. But they're there. Raiders are at least top 12, top 15, something like that. But the rest of the defenses, and this is a point you made during the offseason, because people were like, wait a minute, why do you think the Broncos are going to be better? Or not the Broncos, but you think the Chargers are going to be better than us, blah, blah, blah. Because everybody gets better. It's not like teams stand pat and you get better and nobody else does. And so, Mo, I look at that and I think, wow, it's going to be tough with division games. You talk about New Orleans firing Dennis Allen. Maybe they get a swing from their interim coach like the Raiders did last year. You know, you don't know what's going to happen there. They're pretty bad on the field, obviously, and the disarray around Derek Carr continues. The Michael Thomas stuff was crazy. But anyway, I think fans are now at an acceptance point, but I do want to see if they can establish some sort of running game. Is Zamir White, look, is he even in the conversation in the future? I mean, Alexander Mattison is what he is, but the Raiders are going to need to draft a running back too. But can you at least start to get things going in the right direction, even if you don't win ball games?
Right, and I think that's what you're looking at going forward. We're not saying that the Raiders have to go on a miraculous run like they did last year from the midpoint of the season to the end of it for Antonio Pierce to keep his job. But they have to be a lot better in the back 55 minutes of the football game. So, Scott, I was on Bleacher Report Live on Sunday, and I said, if you watch Raider games just the first 5 minutes, you would think that the Raiders are a playoff team. Because they're able to go out there within the first 2 drives and score points. And I'm not talking field goal, I'm talking touchdowns. But then you watch the rest of the 55 minutes of the football game, and you realize, yeah, this is a 2-17. So it has to look better after the first 2 drives. I think the Raiders can start there. I know it's a low bar, baby steps, whatever you want to call it. But it's got to look better than it has after their first 2 drives offensively. And you would think if they're more competitive offensively, it keeps the defense well rested and off the field. So we'll see complementary football, as you, Evan, and I always talk about, right? So I think that's part of making these changes. As I said, the other half of it, or the major part of it, is Antonio Pierce trying to save his own job. But the Raiders have to be competitive. I know you mentioned it's a tough schedule. Miami on the other side of the bye with Tua Tagovailoa back. Chiefs on Black Friday. The Denver Broncos in the division. I get all of that, but they have to at least show that they belong on the same field because, Scott, we talk about this every week. They've trailed by double digits in every football game this year.
Every game.
Every single game they've fallen behind, whether they won or lost, they've trailed by double digits. Has to be better than that, Scott.
Yeah, and I think, too, that, you know, again, like you said, the defensive unit is better than the offensive unit, clearly. But if you look at the defensive unit, I just want to, because I had somebody say this yesterday and talk about, well, man, it's the first time in a long time we haven't had to worry about the defense. I'm like, okay, the defense has yielded 88 points in 3 games. It's been outscored 46-6 in the last 2 minutes of the first half this season. So you can't close out halves. Even if you're behind a little bit or you're ahead, doesn't matter. You can't close out 46-6, Mo. Okay? Then you look at the offensive side of things. You talked about the ineptitude there, and people want to blame the defensive struggles on the offense. Part of that is true, although our good friend Rossi Biddle down in Australia was like, well, they're on the field too much. No, the time of possession, I keep going over this because this past game against Cincinnati, it was askew for sure. But overall, it's not that. It's just the offense holds the ball and doesn't do anything with it. In fact, 4 touchdowns in 50 offensive drives. I didn't know that's possible. I mean,
it's possible. If you've been watching the Raiders, you know it's possible because of those turnovers. those
Yeah.
turnovers pop up, Scott. We saw another turnover, a botched handle between Gardner Minshew and DJ Turner. Before you know it, Gardner Minshew's sitting on the bench and Desmond Ridder's on the football game. So when you turn the ball over, you can have these long drives, but if the Raiders have a tendency to turn the ball over in the middle of the field or in the red zone, then you're going to have these long drives, but you're going to come away with 0 points.
Mo, let me ask you this, though. If somebody says to you, okay, so all the things you're talking about, miscues, turnovers, obviously Gardner Minshew's been responsible for a lot of them, and then you have injuries, and then you see what's going on, what do you say to people who say, well, that's not the coach's fault?
The injuries aren't the coach's fault, right?
Right.
That's beyond their control. Devontae Adams asking for a trade. That's, who knows what happened behind closed doors. That story will eventually come out there. But with the turnovers, not all the turnovers are poor execution. For some of the turnovers, you can actually point to some of the play calling situations. Why is the ball designed to go in this spot at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Why you designing the play to throw the ball here instead of there? Some of that you can blame Gardner Minshew. Sometimes, as we talked about, we showed Ted Wynn's video. Sometimes he has to just let it go to the right receiver. But with that said, Scott, the players that are on the field, who makes the decisions, who starts, who gets to play in certain positions, who's your right tackle, who's your right guard. Pierce said, the quarterback decision, he was in on that decision, even though he's a defensive-minded head coach. And he hired the head coach. He hired the coordinator, who also helps to make that decision. So the players you put on the field, if they're making mistakes, who's supposed to put them in position to succeed and make plays? The coaches, right? So part of it is the players have to execute, but the coaches have to make the right decisions and putting these players in the right position to make plays.
Right, because the players don't run practice either, do they?
No,
they don't run practice. And I always try to use real world examples to just show you, because I think a lot of times, because especially with sports where we get emotional and we're fan generated, and no matter what your favorite sport is, I try to put it into real terms. So if I own a restaurant, right? I own a restaurant, I have a chef, I have servers. If my servers are bad, okay, do I just say, oh, sorry, they were bad, I fired them? Come back. Why won't, that's not my fault. The food's great. Servers suck. Yeah, we fired them. It's not my fault. No, you don't, right? So, I mean, it's the same thing, because it's preparation, it's expectation, it's the practice, it's the skill set, all that stuff boils down, and there's blame. We talked about this. Blame, if you want to call it blame. There's responsibility, I should say, everywhere. GM, coach, players, you name it. It's everywhere. So you can't excuse one and not hold them accountable. You have to do it to everybody. So it's all good. And I know we have a lot of folks. We're going to be doing the Raider Nation Mailbag coming up here as we head into the bye week. We will be back on Thursday for another show as well. We'll see what happens between now and then as far as the Raiders' offensive plans go with the firings and what Antonio Pierce is going to do. But when we come back, Mo, we're going to get. You think the fans have anything to say about what's going on?
Nah, not that there's anything interesting going on. I'm sure there will be, lighthearted calls, people joking around. And,
yes.
Yeah, of course.
We got some emotional calls. We got some good, longtime callers like our good friend Gary Harkenreader, who's one of my favorite calls this week. It's a really long one. You'll hear it. And then MDM in Hawaii, who called in twice, because the first time he called, he decided to redo it and call it the second time. So shout out to MDM, in Hawaii. And then Tarek, Yandal. I mean, the usual suspects are back. They're becoming like contributors to the show more than callers. People are like, well, how come you don't get different callers? We get great callers. I don't care. Call in a different time. We got Jacob from Fresno. We got a lot of people. So we're going to get to that right after this break on Silver and Black today. Of course, video brought to you by our good friends at BetUS. We are an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Mo Moten, Scott Branson coming back with you and getting your calls next on the Raider Nation Mailbag. All right, it's time for you to speak up. Yes, I think you probably have a few things to say, Raider Nation. It's the Raider Nation Mailbag here on Silver and Black today. The Tuesday edition. We are an Odyssey Sports original podcast. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your audio. Also, make sure you listen on the radio. We are on Sundays in the morning on KDON 101.5 FM in Las Vegas, as well as 98.5 The Bet 2. And our video brought to you by our good friends at BetUS. A reminder, you can get 150% Sign-up bonus, 125% on your second and third deposits, all up to $2,000 just by using the code YouTube150. That's the promo code YouTube150. Start playing today with this exclusive offer. We thank you guys for being with us, and we thank BetUS for bringing you this video. Okay, Mo, we got to get right to these calls, man. As you can imagine, people have a lot to say, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start in California, of course, the birth state of the Raiders. And this is Felix down in Orange County. Here's Felix.
Hey, Scott and Mo. Felix out here in Orange County. Long-time listener, first-time caller. It's not even in the third quarter, and I'm already calling in. But I think it might be time to start Desmond Ridder. I don't see how much more downside we can have with that worst-case scenario. We got the same thing, but younger and potentially maybe, a little bit of a trade asset there later. But, yeah, I don't know. It's not looking great. Is Getsy going to be out already, too? I know there's not really anyone else, but maybe at least someone else has a couple better ideas than he does, because it doesn't look like he's got too many good ones out there, or the fact that not too much ingenuity. And even the announcers are talking about it. The Bengals have one more win. They're at 3-5, but they're talking about they still have playoff hopes if everything goes well. But Raiders are at 2-5, and there's no hope there. So that's pretty telling about how the outlook is on the team. One more win, and they got the chance. One less win. There's no chances. We're hoping for a high draft pick, so let me know what you guys think.
Felix, all right, man. Thanks for your call. Two things there, Mo. Desmond Ridder, and then he talked about the Bengals. The difference with the Bengals is they have a quarterback, they have an offense that moves the ball. Their defense has been trouble. They still think they can make the playoffs because they have a high-octane offense. You saw what Joe Burrow did against the Raiders. So I think that's that. But when we get to Desmond Ridder, upside versus downside, you talked about this, I think, last week, but let Felix know your thoughts there.
So the Raiders have a lot of shifting going on with their offensive line. Monday morning, Pierce talked about having 8 offensive linemen on the field. He said he's never seen that before, never been a part of a situation like that. When you have an offensive line that's unsettled, Colton Miller was in a walking boot, I believe, after Sunday's game. Andrews Pete went down. Cody Whitehair went down. You have 2 rookies in DJ Glaze and Jackson Powers-Johnson playing a lot of snaps. You want a more athletic quarterback because you would think that that athletic quarterback can mask some of the pass protection issues that you're going to face. Now, Desmond Ridder got sacked multiple times, but he was thrown into the fire in the middle of the game. You would think that he'll be, next time around, assuming he is a starter, and I think he will be, he'll be more prepared to use his legs if he has to. Now, Gardner Minshew is more mobile than Aiden O'Connell, but again, that's a low bar. Desmond Ridder is an actual athletic quarterback, so that during his time in Cincinnati, you saw it in Atlanta when he was with the Falcons for a couple of years. You started Desmond Ridder because, as Felix points out, how much worse could it get? Now, don't answer that question. It's a rhetorical question, but I don't think it could get much worse, assuming Desmond Ridder can use his legs to kind of offset some of the issues that the Raiders are going to have on the offensive line.
Right, and remember, Desmond Ridder's been on 3 teams in a year, and I like him, actually. Going back, I actually thought the Raiders could have a chance to draft him when he came out. He went in the 3rd round a little ahead of where I thought maybe they would take him, but he turns the ball over a lot, too, so we'll have to see if he's able to. We saw a couple examples of that against Cincinnati where he came close to turning the ball over, so we'll see if he can overcome that. Now, the good side is, even if the Raiders don't win, if Desmond Ridder can put together a string of good games, to your point, I mean, you can create. Felix asked about a trade. You can create some value there, and maybe you can. I mean, since they plucked him off the practice squad, it's a very lucrative deal for the Raiders. So if they can get him to play well and maybe get some buzz around him, then maybe they can get something for him. If not, at least they give it a shot and see if he's worth holding on to as a developmental project, even with another young quarterback coming in. So good stuff. All right, Felix, we appreciate it, man. All right, we're moving on now. Our good friend Gary Harkenreader, who's calling in more now. Gary, I appreciate it, man. It's good. It's good. See, technology, it can work for you. Although we still love your emails if you want to send them. All right, here's Gary with this really long call, Mo. Are you ready?
Ready. Fire away.
Hey, Scott. Gary Harkenreader. Hey, just one real quick question. Does anybody know how to put out a dumpster fire? Just wondering. All right. Thanks for taking the call. All right. Bye-bye.
Oh, boy. It's hard to laugh because I know people are hurting out there with their team struggling so bad, but I got to appreciate Gary giving a little moment of levity there. And, of course, I was fudging that his call was long. It was very short. But Gary's looking at it with a little bit of sense of humor, which you got to do as a Raider fan over the last quarter century, right? Quarter century. It's hard to say that. Wow.
Scott, I read.
Yes.
Did you read before we get to Gary Harker read his long call? Did you read Scott Schefter's piece on like the Raiders' track record? They've had a head coach or coordinator fired in 4 of the last 5 years.
Yes.
So you just go down the line. Paul Gunther in 2020. After that, Gruden had to resign. That was outside the Raiders' control, of course. 2022 was relatively quiet by Raiders standards. And then you had Josh McDaniels and Mick Lombardi get let go, head coach and offensive coordinator, and this year Luke Getsy. So they've had constant turnover, and they have to find some stability with the right coaches. Now, to Gary Harker read his call, how do you put out a dumpster fire? You don't. You let it flame out, and you let it smoke out,
You get
and
a
then
new
you go
dumpster.
into the off season, and you hope that you get a new dumpster. And you hope that it doesn't catch on fire.
Right.
And you can dress it up as something other than a dumpster, you would hope.
Yeah, and I just believe, and I know there's good points to the contrary of what I'm going to say, so don't get me wrong on this. But for the people who say, well, we need stability, no. If it's bad, it's bad, okay? If you have a tomato in your fridge and it's rotten, it's not going to get better. You just got to move on. Like, rip off the Band-Aid. And yes, unfortunately, you just laid out, Mo, 4 of the last 5 years. It's bad decision-making by Mark Davis. What can you say? And whoever else was in charge at the time making those decisions, GMs and so on and so forth. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you it all goes back to ownership. You cannot overcome ownership if they make bad choices. I'm not saying Mark Davis tried to make bad choices. He just has. Again, it's not a criticism. It's just fact. All you got to do is look at the record, right? All right, now we're going on to Jay in Pennsylvania. Here's Jay.
Hey, guys, it's Jay from PA. Just wanted to call in. You know, what am I looking at? I cannot stand going on Twitter, going on YouTube, outside of your guys' show, I love your guys' show, and listening to people continuously back Antonio Pierce.
Ooh.
If this guy was not hired as the head coach, more than likely, he doesn't get a head coaching job. Likely, he doesn't get a defensive coordinator job because he doesn't call defensive plays. What are we doing? If the Raiders double down on their mistake and bring this guy back, it's a clown show. It's a joke. The Raiders are always a day late and $1 short. Last season, the coaches that were available were amazing. Last year, the quarterbacks that were available in the draft were amazing. Congratulations. The Raiders went 3-1 to end the season, took themselves out of potentially, if I'm not mistaken, the 6th overall pick to the 13th. Now, I'm not going to complain because it's Brock Bowers, but you didn't beat anybody. Yeah, you beat the Chiefs. It took 2 defensive touchdowns, but you beat the Broncos with a backup quarterback. You beat the Chargers with a backup quarterback. There were no quality wins last year. You beat the Giants and the Jets. That's what got him this job. This is ridiculous at this point. How can people still back this guy? This is absurd. Sorry, just wanted to put that out there. Appreciate you guys for always keeping it straight with us when other podcasters can't. I deeply appreciate your honesty and your forwardness. Keep up the good work. Love your guys' show.
Jay, great call, man.
Hey,
not just because I agree with a lot of it, but it reminds me of college, Mo, and that was when, I drink too much and I just had to get it up, dude. I said, blah. And that's what Jay just did.
I like how Jay went on full blown rant and then apologized. Like he got it off his chest and he realized like he just went on a full rant. He's like, I'm sorry. Let me get back to
No.
being Jay again. But we love it, Jay. We love that type of emotion. We love that type of fire you bring to the show. But to get to the call, we brought up this point last year that while we felt like Antonio Pierce, garnered the trust and love of the locker room, we said it. We said that the Raiders did beat a bunch of teams with backup quarterbacks, except for the Chiefs, of course, on Christmas Day, right? So we said
Right.
temper your expectations as far as what this team could be because they're not going to have the same run of luck facing backup quarterbacks in consecutive weeks as they did last year. And that's why my prediction also didn't go above a ceiling of 7 to 8 wins. And people were like, how 7 to 8 wins? We're a better football team. I'm like, well, you see the opponents that you played last year to get some of those wins that Jay just brought up. But to get to his point about Antonio Pierce and letting him go. Now, I've always said on the show, don't let him go during the middle of the season. Let him finish the season and then reassess. My whole point of saying that is in the offseason, and Jay brought this up during the call, in the offseason, you have to weigh not only does Antonio Pierce deserve the job, but are there better candidates out there that want this job? Because even if Antonio Pierce's team shows some fire, shows some competitive fight, if there's a better candidate out there, you go with the better candidate, right? It's not about being against Antonio Pierce. It's not about being against Raiders culture. It should be about winning football games. Forget how it looks. People get caught up in the aesthetics of how it's going to look. We want it to look a certain way. You know what I want it to look like? I want it to look like a winning football team, whoever is the head coach. I don't care about aesthetics anymore. I don't care about what it looked like 20 years ago. I don't care what it looked like 50 years ago. I respect the players who played 20 years ago, 50 years ago. But I care about winning more than aesthetics right now.
Right. Remember people making fun of Jim Harbaugh for singing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow? That's so stupid.
Corny.
Corny. Hey, you know what? Give me corny and W's.
Yep.
Before Air Force Ones and lowriders. Like
cool.
Not that I don't like any of those things. Those are all cool things. But it's like, again, to your point, we live. A lot of it was. I get it. It's the same reason why people still go back to, well, it was a mistake not to hire Rich Bisaccia. No, it wasn't. Did Rich Bisaccia become a head coach anywhere? He was so good and did such a good job that teams were lined up to hire him as head coach. No. Nice guys. Great job. Same with Antonio Pierce last year. They did a great job. They deserve all the credit in the world for that. But that does not mean they're head coaches. Come on now. Anyway, there's Jay. Awesome, man. All right.
Appreciate you, Jay.
We're staying on the East Coast. We're going down a little further south towards Moton Country. Not quite Moton Country, although you have people in Virginia, don't you? No.
Not family.
Not family. Oh. That's a different story for a different time. All right. Here's Ron in Virginia.
Hey, Scott. Mo, this is Ron from Virginia calling in. I called in last week, second time calling in. Just calling in, talk about this abysmal game that was just on. The Raiders got their butts whooped. It seems to be an ongoing theme. I was thinking about the Antonio Pierce thing. People were calling for him to be fired, everything. Like I said, I talked to you last week. I said I was on the Antonio Pierce bandwagon, but I'm kind of off of it now. But I agree, I don't think he'll be fired this year, but there do need to be some major changes within the organization, the coaching, and some of the players. They need to go out and get their quarterback first, get a quarterback up. I kind of feel bad for Minshew. He just looks like all his confidence is gone. He just doesn't look like a confident guy. And then the piling on all the injuries, they're just heading in the wrong direction. I don't see much progress from this team the rest of the year, but I know for one thing, Getsy really does have to go. The Raiders need to go out and get them, find them a young, find an offensive-minded coordinator if they're going to keep Pierce that is quarterback friendly. Like I said, go out and draft, get the quarterback. You can pick up a couple of maybe good offensive linemen in the later third, fourth round. Probably guard or whatever like that. They have some young players. People want to get rid of a lot of players. I'm talking about trading Max. I wouldn't do that, man, because Max is a generational player. you got to have something to build on. And also, picking up draft picks doesn't always pan out for teams. Look at the incident with Gruden back in the day. He traded away Mack and Cooper and all them guys, and look what happened. What did they get in return? They got a couple of good guys, but basically that was it. But like I said, I think they just need to Telesco's just waiting. I think they're going to. He's given time to rebuild his team. I think that's probably what he's going to do. I do see a few players not coming back next year, not re-signing them, but they do have some young players that that are fairly that they can hold on to. Like I said, I don't really feel good. I don't think it's a good idea to have a fire sale. You keep your foundation of players and then you just build around that. But you definitely need a quarterback, which is something they didn't avoid. But tell me what you guys think. Also, too, I just wanted to say, Jackson Powers Johnson, man, on a lighter fun side, man. That Halloween costume he had as a guy in SNL living in the van down by the river was hilarious. Just want to let you guys know. But enjoy you guys' show. Keep up the good work. Bye.
All right, there's Ron in Virginia. And by the way, we'll start with that. Jackson Powers Johnson, the funny costume, yes, but did a great job at center. Is there any question, Mo, that they should keep him at center?
I don't think there's much question from a lot of us because we pointed out on the show that he was center at Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his
Award-winning.
natural position. So they re-signed Andre James, so it bumped him to guard. Now, does Andre James have any trade value? He's banged up right now, didn't play against the San Diego Bengals. I don't know if a team is going to be willing to take Andre James. They get 3 years, $24 million contract. Maybe the Raiders admit that mistake and they move on from him. Who knows? Next year, we'll find out. But to get to Ron's call, two things that stood out to me. Number one, he talked about finding a young offensive coordinator. You know whose job that is, Scott? It's Antonio Pierce's job to do that. It's Antonio Pierce's job to identify a young mind or to tap into his network and bring in an offensive coordinator. That's his job. So we got a lot of people saying, well, he didn't have the greatest choices because Cliff Kingsbury backed out and the Raiders panicked and they brought in Luke Getsy. Okay, so now he fires his offensive coordinator mid-season. If he sticks around for 2025, he's had a head start now. He's had a head start on finding the next brilliant offensive mind. If he sticks around, if he keeps his job. That's number one. Two, he talked about not trading Max Crosby. I agree with that. You want to have something to build around here. I see a lot of people say fire sale. I still think the Raiders make one or two moves before the deadline. Tashawn Reed and Vic Tafer of The Athletic don't think they make any moves. But I think if you're the Raiders and you're 2-7, you have to embrace who you are. And that's a basement-dwelling football team that's going to be rebuilding next year. So you want to have draft capital, ammunition for your general manager. Now, I'm not trading Max Crosby. Brock Bowers is off limits. Christian Wilkins, you just signed up to a big deal. You're not going to trade him. Nate Hobbs, I would bring back. Jacorian Bennett, of course, my guy. Those two guys in the secondary. Everyone else is negotiable. And I know Raider fans love Jacoby Myers, but he probably has the most value of any player on that roster right now.
Absolutely.
Because you're seeing it every week, Scott. Wide receivers are traded. He has the most value. If a team for the right price is going to give me something, third, even, second round pick. Remember, Bill Belichick sent the second round pick for Mohamed Sanu. Anything could happen. If I'm for the right price, I'm also trading Jacoby Myers because, again, he's going to be 28 this year. He only has one more year left on his contract. I understand he's pretty good now, but you're probably going to draft multiple wide receivers next year anyway, younger guys.
Right.
So for the right price, I would trade Jacoby Myers as well. Colton Miller's banged up, so who knows what happens there. Devon Diablo, if somebody wants him. Trayvon Merrick, I don't think they're going to resign him. All of those guys are up for discussion on the trade block.
And I would say the only one that could surprise people, and I know you're not going to like this, Mo, is Nate Hobbs. The buzz around the league is so big, and it's justified. And I don't want to see them get rid of Nate Hobbs because he's a young player. Jacorian Bennett, I don't think there's any chance. Obviously, it's not the same market. But Nate Hobbs getting a lot of mentions around the league. And if you're the Raiders and you fully embrace it, then you might do that, because you're right. You have a lot of guys that haven't signed yet, that you haven't signed yet. You have him, you have Robert Spillane. There could be major changes on defense too. And if there's a coaching change, you can bet there's going to be a different defensive coordinator. Patrick Graham's not going to go into a third regime. I can tell you that. And so we'll see what happens. But it'll be interesting. To your point, though, embrace what you are and what pieces you can sell without the core. And you mentioned the core, I think, and maybe Nate Hobbs is part of that core, except he doesn't have a contract yet. So that's weird. It says to me that maybe, it hasn't been a priority for them, and maybe they're not convinced. I don't know. We'll see what Tom Telesco does, but good stuff. And appreciate the call, Ron, as always. All right, now we go out to Hawaii. We go all the way from Virginia to Hawaii. I said one time we went East Coast to Hawaii, and I said halfway around the world, and somebody went on like a 4-paragraph rant on YouTube telling me that wasn't halfway across the world. They're right, but it's just a term. Anyway, here's MDM in Hawaii.
Hey, aloha, Scott and Mo. This is MDM in Hawaii. I'm not sweating all these losses. I'm just looking over here at the ocean. It's beautiful. And I don't let the Raiders dictate the week-to-week emotions, because
Smart.
that was what I did as a kid. And a lot of Sundays I wasn't having a good day or a good Monday either. But real quick, Raiders, the biggest problem we have is Mark Davis at the top. Somebody said AP doesn't have a vision. He's absolutely right, but that vision comes above Mr. AP. It comes from Mark Davis. And, his whole play, everybody gives him credit because he moved to Vegas and got a lot of money. Hey, I don't really care. That doesn't help me. He's not even spending all his money anyway. Look at our cap space that we still have available that we didn't spend. We got all kinds of cap space. We got money. It's not helping us out. We just got a home field where the fans can't even feel proud going to the game because we're invaded by other teams. So it's been a disaster. Mark Davis, everything he's done has been a disaster, and we got to figure it out quick, man. We got this year. This is the year. We got to get a real head coach, somebody with some gravitas, somebody with some experience, somebody who makes good decisions. Real quick, quarterback. That's the other big thing besides the coach. Head coach we hired. We got AP's got to go. Jesse's got to go. As Raider luck always has it, it's like a Jamarcus Russell, Brady Quinn year. We don't have a great quarterback this year ever at the top. Maybe Cam Ward's the only guy I'm getting a little bit excited about. Not as big on Sanders, Ewers, some of these other cats. I don't know why no one's talking about Curtis Rourke. I keep putting it out there on social media. He keeps balling out. Reminds me of a Big Ben. He played for Miami, Ohio before he went to Indiana, is undefeated. And then we also got Jackson Dart, just 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. These are 2 guys. If the Raiders were intelligent, I'd either take Ward at the very top, or I would trade down, get more picks, maybe get a running back like Gianti, maybe get some more OL, take Rourke or Dart, trade back into the first, or maybe they're projected in the second round. I don't know. But there's other quarterbacks besides these guys, and I think it's time we get the right system, get the right, offensive coach, let him pick his quarterback, develop him. And remember, we're in Vegas, and we need a quarterback that's got a little bit of maturity. So that's all I got for today. Go Raiders. Thanks for what you guys do. Aloha.
There you go, MDM. Great call, man. He's already going through the scenarios on the draft, which I think is healthy. I think it's healthy, Mo. If you're a Raiders fan and where things are at, probably good. His point about some of the other quarterbacks, listen, no one, even the top 2 quarterbacks, Sanders, Ward, nobody's guaranteed to make it. But when you start getting down to second, third round guys, you're getting into Aiden O'Connell territory too. Now, I'm not saying one of those guys doesn't occasionally come out of those rounds and does pretty well, but I get what he's saying there. But I'm sorry, if the Raiders don't do everything they can to get a quarterback in the top of the first round, they're nuts.
So the MDM's call, right? Why he asked specifically, why are people talking about? I just wanted to address something specific.
I know you do. I'm just kidding.
Being that he mentioned, why aren't people talking about some of the other prospects out there? Curtis Rourke out of Indiana. Believe it or not, I have a lot of people out there in Indiana. They're very excited about that program. But he played 4 years in the MAC conference before he goes to Indiana. So he's under the radar for a lot of people who don't watch college football on a regular basis. Scott, you always say this, and I say this too. A lot of people don't watch any other football programs or teams outside of their own. So when you look at the college football landscape, the conversation is going to be dominated by Look at what Cam Ward did. Look at what Shador Sanders did, because they're projected to be the top 2 candidates. And it's very similar to the head coaching candidates. When I get on my Bleacher Report lives, I say, well, who do you like as a candidate? It's always 2 names, Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick. Other than that, I don't get any other names. So MDM, whenever we talk about candidates for a position, a key position, you're always going to hear about the top 2 or 3 names, and everyone else is just going to go fall by the wayside. You're not going to really hear about them. As we get closer to the draft, and Scott and I will try to do our best to do this, we'll have reporters from certain programs who cover some of these quarterbacks and give you an in-depth look at some of the guys that are not talked about as much as Cam Ward and Shador Sanders. So stay tuned for that. There's a lot of time for us. I know you're way ahead of us because you've already checked out of this Raiders season. And I understand why, but we're going to get into a lot of quarterback talk as we get into December and January.
Yes, we will. We'll start turning towards that. We want to start to look forward and find out what the Raiders are going to do and what they can do. So thanks for the call, MDM. Appreciate that. All right. Now, take a breath. Here comes Tarek, who I'm sure called before the game was over. Here's Tarek.
Good afternoon, Scott and Mo. This is Tarek checking in with you guys from Tucson, Arizona.
Oof.
Bengals just went up 31-10 with about a little over 7 minutes to go in the third quarter. These calls are getting earlier and earlier. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. A good, promising opening drive for a touchdown, moving the ball all around, throwing the ball, being aggressive. We've scored an opening drive touchdown in 4 of our last 5 games. And then, just like every week, we go away from it. We go away from what works. I wonder if that's the strategy for tanking. It certainly appears to be the case because there's no other explanation for it. The problem is there's 8 more games to go in the year, so you can't make it look too obvious, I guess. The defense is struggling. Obviously, no adjustments made. As I said before, you got to burn this house down. This is absolutely ludicrous to see this clown show go on for, I can't even imagine, 8 more games. But I think at this point it looks like it's a strategy for tanking. I would definitely want to know what you guys think about that. Burn the house down like the franchise has never done before. Jettison the entire coaching staff, maybe Telesco, and take that first brick and put it on the ground, and that's what it's going to take, with the exception of keeping a few quality players like Max Crosby, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Brock Bowers, Daniel Carlson, A.J. Cole, and Christian Wilkins. I would think everybody else should be up for sale. Want to hear what you guys think about that as well. 31-10, like I said, this is over already. Looking forward to your guys' show this week. Looking forward to your post-game show today as well. Over and out from Tucson, Arizona. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. There's Tarek. And Tarek, sorry we didn't have a post-game show. I was moving houses here in Cincinnati, so been a crazy 2 weeks. Wedding, housing, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but Tarek, you brought it up, Mo. You said a couple callers ago about the core players you want to keep. And people, you got to trade Max Crosby. You can get so much value. No, you don't trade him unless he wants to be traded. That's a different story. But Max Crosby wants to be a Raider for life, so that would be crazy to trade him. But I think he's right, though. I think you need. I'm at this point at the bye. I agree with him on. I don't agree with him on Telesco because I think Telesco's done a fine job already so far. But you look at the coaching staff. You look at the trade to try to get capital. I think you got to do it, Mo.
Right. So Telesco's gotten you Brock Bowers, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who I forgot to mention as being one of those core Raiders that you want to build around, and DJ Glaze. As I said on Twitter yesterday or Sunday, that right now his 2024 class at the top looks promising. I maybe my eyes deceive me, but I think the Cameron Richardson even made a play on Sunday.
He's been playing well, yeah.
So there's a lot of promise there. So I'm not moving Tom Telesco, but the coaching staff every week I get more and more sour on this coaching staff. I've been not necessarily calling for Luke Getsy's job since September, but I've gone back to my old saying of what more do we need to see out of Luke Getsy's offense to know he isn't the guy. And finally, the Raiders pulled the trigger and let him go in some of the offensive coaches. But go ahead, Scott.
No, I'm saying it was a bad hire. We said it from the beginning. It was just a bad hire. I mean, look. That was Antonio Pierce decided to hire him. Then I get people even today saying, well, he wanted Cliff Kingsbury, but Mark Davis wouldn't give him the 3rd-year contract. What? That was a rumor. It's not true. He took a better job. They negotiated and he pulled out. Okay? it's like you want to excuse that. No, if he really thought that the Raiders opportunity and Antonio Pierce were the best opportunity for him, and this third year thing, there could be truth to that, because it's been rumored. No one's ever officially said how long Antonio Pierce's contract is, but we've heard numerous reports say 2 years. So Cliff Kingsbury probably wanted that third year for security, as any coach would want, thinking, well, if this guy doesn't last, then maybe I can be the head coach. And they wouldn't give it to him because they're probably not giving anybody on the staff more than 2 years. If that's the case, why the hell would you take the job? By the way, they also talked to Chip Kelly, who eventually went to Ohio State. And when they were talking and got hot and heavy with Kingsbury, they said no thank you to Chip Kelly. So there were other opportunities there. It's a bad hire. Who owns the hire? Antonio Pierce owns the hire. All right. Now we're going to get to the famous Jacob from Fresno.
Scott, Gully, Princeton, in Mitty, Midtown, Moulton. This is Jacob from Fresno. What's up, guys? Listen up. I'm going to get a little serious with you here. Now, I'm calling Sunday night after the game. I don't usually call this early. I usually let the thing stew and, just get a little chipper. But I got to be honest. I knew we were going to lose today, so I'm chipper. I'm fine. I wasn't at the point where I was like, this game's going to get me down. No, it's fine. We're going to lose this season. We're going to lose a lot. I'm good with it. I understand. It's unrealistic at this point to expect anything more. I was of the opinion that we were going to be a 7-10 win team. Like 7-10 was going to be the record, because we don't have a quarterback. It's obvious. Our offensive line is pretty shaky. It's obvious. Our defense is, not all it was chalked up to be. But even if it were, I use the illustration that I go to the bench press. I could put up 225, no problem. You put 225 on a bar, I'm lifting that thing off my chest. But if I'd been working out for an hour and a half, I already did 6 sets of bench press. You load 225 on a bar, I don't think I'm going to get that up, guys. I'm not going to perform the same way I would have if I'm fresh. So the defense is not giving fresh legs. They're looking bad because the offense is really bad. They keep giving the ball away. So when you're on defense all game long, you're not going to look good. Well, guys, listen. We are in a situation where we got a bad offensive mind calling plays. We're in a situation where we don't have a quarterback. We're in a situation where we don't have a lot of depth on offensive line. We don't have a lot of depth at receiver. We got good tight ends. That's about it. But offense, we don't even have a star running back. Alexander Madison is kind of there. But we lost Josh Jacobs. We lost Devontae Adams. We lost Derek Carr. I know that's years ago. But we lost Aiden O'Connell as well. Mm-hmm. And we don't have an answer, right? So you can't expect to be a playoff team when you have all those things against you. Here's the thing. We're not making excuses. But I want you to look at that film. Watch JPJ. Did he quit on us? No. Watch Max Crosby. Did he quit? Taylor Von Tayson, did he quit? Robert Slane, did he quit? No. The guys did not quit because the guys are still fighting, because the leadership at the top has them continuing to fight. AP is the guy. Don't doubt him. We're going to get to the top of this thing. That's all I got to say. Go Raiders.
Well, there's Jacob. And for one of the first times, I disagree with Jacob. I think those guys fight because they're competitors and they're players. I'm not saying that they don't fight for their coaches. I'm not saying that, because I know, and Max Crosby obviously stepped out and was willing to go out front to get him hired. And that's great. And I don't believe that Antonio Pierce has lost the locker room. That's not my criticism of it all. He's a player's coach. I don't think there's any issue with that, but that doesn't mean he's doing a good job either. So
I'll take the other side of the call and talk about Jacob said he thought that the Raiders were a 7-10 team. Mm-hmm. It's funny to me, Scott, and I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute.
Oh, here we go. I got to put you full screen for this on the video.
But it's funny to me, Scott, how it only took 2 months for people to come to senses with reality. Mm-hmm. Now, on this show, we allow people to speak their mind, whether they agree or disagree with us. So you just said you disagree with Jacob. We disagree all the time with some of our calls, but we let them say their piece. And back in the offseason, Scott, you and I said 7-8 wins was the ceiling. we weren't even willing to even go and say the Raiders could be a winning football team. We got a lot of pushback. We got a lot of people calling us out of our names. You know, some of the names can't even repeat on the show because their kids listening. Shout out to the kids. Shout out to the people who have their kids listening to the show. Shout out to y'all. Y'all the real MVPs. But we had people that weren't even willing to hear us out. And this isn't an I told you so moment, but this is just a moment to say, look, we're not saying we're always right about these things. We're wrong all the time. All we ask is that we have your ear and just to hear us out on some of our opinions, whether they're positive or critical. I don't want to say negative, but critical.
Critical, yeah.
And again, we were very critical of this coaching staff, particularly Luke Getsy and the quarterback position, how the Raiders handled it. And we said those were the reasons why we don't have the Raiders being a winning football team. Now, we didn't expect it to go south this quickly. I expect the Raiders to actually start out pretty well, considering the schedule. The easier part of the schedule was early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But we also said that the Raiders are not going to be a winning football team. And there are a lot of people that said, you know, call us all the names in the book. And those those same people, Scott, aren't there to say, you know what, you guys were closer to correct. I was wrong on this one. I'm always willing to say, hey, I was wrong on this one. But the people who are outlandish with some of their comments aren't willing to come out and say, you know what, guys, I was out of bounds on that one. I was out of pocket there. You guys were more on track than I was.
Mm-hmm.
No one was on the dot perfect with their prediction. But you know what? I was a little outlandish with my takes. My bad on that. And all I ask, Scott, though, again, is not to take a victory lap, but it's to say, just as we allow callers on this show to hear them out, whether we agree or disagree, just hear us out.
Right.
We may be wrong. We may be right. But just hear us out on why we have some concerns if we have them. Because we talked about a lot of these concerns, a lot of what's happening now. We talked about a lot of this in July, June, August, before the season started. And you're seeing a lot of it right now, halfway through the season.
Nice. Good soapbox. Yeah, I mean, listen, and you're right. It's not a like we're going to rub it in your face kind of thing, because we didn't want to be right about that. And yes, there was a lot of people came at us. I mean, even with the coaching struggles, a lot of people have come at me with some pretty vile stuff, accusing me of being racist and this and that, because Antonio Pierce is black and I think he's doing a bad job. If he was white, I would say the same thing. So it's weird because I get liking somebody and wanting them to succeed, right? When you really like somebody, right? Most people don't know Antonio Pierce as a person, of course, but they like his persona. They like what he did last year. They like how he kind of brought to the forward kind of the old Raider mentality. And I understand that. And so rooting for him, no problem with that for fans out there. But when it goes wrong, you can't just sit there and say that, well, it's not his fault. And to your point, Mo, I think it's got to be, you got to look at things through a regular lens and say, well, I like the guy, but I like a lot of people. And if they don't do a good job, they just don't do a good job. Now, we'll see. He's got 8 more games to prove me wrong. I just don't see it. So we'll see how it all ends up. But
Scott,
good stuff,
really quick,
Jacob.
We were really quick, Scott. We were critical of Josh McDaniels when.
Sure, we were.
How many times did I say how much more do we have to see when Josh McDaniels was the head coach?
You remember?
How many times did we both say this?
Every show, I used to call it coaching malpractice. That's what the term that I used to use with Josh McDaniels. So yeah, absolutely. And it's not that we're negative. I mean, when coaches do well, we'll talk about it. So there you go. All right, our last call of the day. We got to get out of here. We're over time already. But anyway, here is Yan Dog, our guy from New York. Here he comes.
Scott, Mo, this is Yan Dog. 41 points given up by the Raiders. Very proud of the silver and black. Good job. Good job. You know something? Me and Tarek, we had a little side bet here, and I said that the Raiders were going to win 24-20. Hey, they scored 24, but they didn't give up 20. They gave up a whopping 41. So nothing to be proud about. I know I told Tarek I gave him my condolences and said basically say that you beat me. And that's what I did with him last time when I projected the Raiders to beat the Ravens. And you know, and I know that you guys were laughing about it when I told him 37-10 and I came up with it, but I guess he can slam me now this time, but I don't understand, man. I'm just giving up. And like I said, I'm just going to say the same thing I said last week. Tank it. I mean, come on, man. I mean, give up 41 points. If it ain't the defense, it's the offense. And like I said, I did say Raiders 24-20, but they got 24, all right, but they didn't give up 20. They gave up to 41, and it's just a joke. It really is. It's really a joke, guys. And I don't know what else to say, man. I wish I could come up with some good things and, to figure out what the problem is. And this goddamn offensive coordinator, Davis, whoever's Antonio Pierce, who doesn't have any experience coaching, it's just ridiculous. It's just going to be a clown show. And I'm not used to seeing my Raiders being a clown show. I'm used to seeing them being an offense and a defensive powerhouse, silver and black. And that patch means a lot on that helmet, okay? So, I don't know, guys. I don't know what to say, but keep up the good work. You guys do a great job. And, we got to stick together as Raiders fans. Because, like I said, Raider Nation deserves more than this. All right, guys. That's about it on my part. So we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, there's Yandog getting a little off the chest, I can see. Right? I mean, it's frustrating, man. I feel terrible for fans because you just want some hope, right? Just some hope, Mo.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I feel most for fans. We're gonna do what we do, regardless. But for the fans who are still emotionally connected to this football team and still watch the team with the hope that that you will see a better product, I can't sit here a straight face and tell you that it'll be better after the bye. Just looking ahead, Scott, Adam Schefter had a post out that said Antonio Pierce, as of Monday, hasn't named an offensive play caller, hasn't named a starting quarterback. They've benched Gardner Minshew 3 times. It's Desmond Ridder time, right? And I said this multiple occasions on the show. But as far as the play call is concerned, Scott Turner, I mean, he was okay in Washington, I guess. And it's not going to be night and day because you still, regardless of who the play caller is, you still have a quarterback problem. Desmond Ridder, there's a reason Desmond Ridder has bounced around a bit early in his career. And Gardner Minshew, we've seen it already. So, as I think Ron in Virginia said, he is just completely shot right now when it comes to his confidence. So regardless of who's calling the plays, the Raiders are going to struggle offensively because of their quarterback position.
Yeah, and Mo, what I'm surprised by is that we still, and again, we're recording late Monday. I still don't understand how you make the move. Well, I'll tell you in a second, but you make a move and you don't have somebody ready. Like you don't have a thought immediately to go to somebody. That tells you something, right?
Really quick, so I think he knows, he just hasn't announced it yet. That's just my theory, but go ahead.
But I also think it was a surprise. I think now maybe he thought he would have to address the Getsy issue during the bye, but I think you're right. I think what you said earlier in the show is the brass sat down with him and said, got to go. Something's got to change. Mm-hmm. And so it surprised him. But, just going back to hiring the OC, good coaches you talk to, and I think this was in the book, was it John Wooden? I can't remember, but John Wooden or one of the coaches, I can't remember the book. I'll find it and correct it next week. But it's always, I have in my drawer a list. So if somebody leaves my staff, I know exactly who's next. Like I have that thing, because you have to think about succession. No matter what happens, people get sick, they quit, they get fired, whatever it is. So you have to be ready for that. That's part of being the CEO coach type. Mm-hmm. So read into that what you will, but good stuff, Mo. Appreciate it. All right, Mo, what do you have as we check out here? What do you have here in the middle of the week you need to let people know about?
I'm going to drop a Sports Nots piece, just talking about how I think the Raiders are going to look coming out of their bye week. So they have a bye in week 10. For Raider fans out there who've been distraught of watching their football team get blown out by double digits, won't have to watch it this week because they're off. I'll spin it ahead and see and talk about what I talked about today. What I expect out of Desmond Ridder as a starter, because I expect him to be named the starter, and Scott Turner as the play caller going forward. No Bleacher Report Live show this week. As I said, Raiders are off, so I'm off duty. But I'll be back with you, Scott, and with Raider Nation on Thursday.
Yes, we'll get back to some of your calls. We'll also get you up to speed on the changes. We'll see what happens in the next few days with the offense, and that's what we'll really get into on Thursday's show. So make sure you join us. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your audio. We appreciate that as well. And one final reminder, 150% sign-up bonus, BetUS. Oh, yeah. Use the promo code YouTube150. That's YouTube150. Start playing today. Get this exclusive offer. They'll also give you 125% sign-up bonus on your second and third deposits using that same code. So thanks to BetUS for being a part of Silver and Black today. Mo, my friend, I will see you Thursday.
Take care, Scott. Take care, Raider Nation.
All right. For our producer, Mike Robier, for Mo Moten, I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. We will talk to everybody on Thursday.